To call a regular council meeting of March 19th, 2024 to order. No public hearings are scheduled for tonight. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda from administration?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, members of council, with permission, we'd like to add, I guess it would go under 11 new business. The MCS met land lease agreement for the tower behind the fire hall.
Anything from council? Seeing anything, I'll look for a motion to accept the addition to the agenda.
I'll make that motion, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Butcher. Discussion? Call that question. All in favor? And that's carried. Motion from council to accept the agenda as amended.
I'll make that motion, Lord.
Councillor Cosby, thank you. Discussion? Call that question. All in favor? And no opposition. We have nothing under the public input or delegations tonight. No presentations from our service providers. So we have item 8.1 on the agenda, the March 5th regular council meeting minutes. Looking for a motion to accept those. Councillor Spicer,
I'll
thank
move
you.
that the minutes of March 5th, 2024 regular council meeting be adopted as amended.
Thank you.
As circulated,
As
sorry.
circulated, they just came in. I was just going to say there was a small typo that prior to the meeting, so that would make it as presented. Discussion? Not seeing any, I'll call that question. All in favor? And that's carried. Item number 9, a business arising out of the minutes and unfinished business. 9.1, the annexed land, the RFD.
Yeah, good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. The report before you is rather lengthy, and I'm not intending on reading it.
1 second, I'm sorry, Mr. Van Buell. Would you like to leave the meeting, or would you like to stay here? You're blocking the camera. The people who are watching the meeting cannot see you.
Sorry, I didn't mean to block the camera. There.
You're not standing for the meeting. You can have a seat over there if you like, but do not block the camera.
Okay. Can I sit here? Where's the camera? There. Is that good for you, Dave?
Thank you. We'll have to have those lowered when we need the screen, but for now, that's fine. Thank you. Mr. Van Buell, my apologies for interrupting you.
So I'll start again. So good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of council. The report before you is rather lengthy, and I'm not intending on reading it word for word. I do want to take this opportunity to clarify some points within the report and ensure that council understands the options presented as well as any other options that may come up as a result of the discussion. To begin, I want to clarify a point that was made in the report around the promise made in the annexation proposal. I made an assumption that the promise that was mentioned by Mr. McLaughlin in the presentation on February 6th was around the statement guaranteeing that the mill rate would be equal to that of Sturgeon County until lands were either developed or otherwise subdivided. In a subsequent discussion that I had with Mr. McLaughlin yesterday, Mr. McLaughlin indicated that the promise he was referring to was the promise of services that have never come to his or other annexed properties. And I do apologize for any of those misunderstandings. To summarize the report, there are a number of options available to council in the response to the request received by Mr. McLaughlin. And again, Mr. McLaughlin was here on behalf of not only himself, but a delegation at the time. To summarize the report, I won't go over those options in detail. They are covered in the report. I will certainly answer any questions and of clarification that council wants after. But the options include an annual canceling of a portion of the taxes owing, creating a subclass where permitted to acknowledge the lands as a special circumstance, or a combination of both of these options. Based on the discussion that Mr. McLaughlin and I had yesterday, it is clear to myself that the preferred option is not included in the report. The option Mr. McLaughlin spoke to me about is the town providing services to the annexed land as promised. Mr. Mayor and Council, Mr. Mayor and Council, I did not include this option because in order to do that, that review would take some, not only time, but also budgetary resources to get council a cost for doing that. So that just wasn't in the purview of the report. As indicated in the report, though, municipalities are responsible for coordinating the orderly development of lands within the municipality. Typically, municipalities do not develop private lands, and administration has not done any background work, again, to investigate that or figure out what those costs would be. Additionally, I want to note that I've attached a number of documents to the report which may not have been referenced in the report. These documents serve as backup material to assist council in understanding the difference in taxes paid from the time of annexation to now and how the mill rates have shifted, leading to the large increases that some properties will experience. Mr. Mayor and members of council, I've tried to cover all of the practical issues in the report. Summarizing some of these options can be a bit tricky to navigate given the interpretations required within the Municipal Government Act. With that, I'm more than happy to answer any questions that council might have on what the options are and what's contained in the report as references to not only the order in council, but the Municipal Government Act and our options around setting our mill rates and our tax rate bylaw. Again, welcome any questions the council may have, and I will do my best to answer any and all questions.
Thank you. For a motion from council. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Olson.
Again, move the council follow the order of council number OC 394-2007, that a portion of the annexed land and the assessable improvements be assessed and taxed in the same manner as all other property of the same assessed class in the town of Redwater.
Thank you. Discussion from council.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Just towards Mr. Van Bueller. You kind of touched on bringing in services or whatever was discussed. Is that kind of normal for annexation or?
So, Mr. Mayor, members of council, the annexation proposal talks about the ability to service land and get services to land. I think what's typical though in any development is the owner of the lands or the developer of the lands. And in this case, these lands are privately held. So typically what happens is a developer comes into the municipality, comes in with a development proposal, and then there's a negotiated development agreement. The normal process for developing lands is you set out the standards, you negotiate what those standards will be. Typically in an urban setting, as an example, roads would be paved, not gravel. And so then the standard of the road paving has to be identified, and that cost is normally put on the developer or the owner of the lands. And again, there's some nuances there depending on who's developing it, because there's times when the owner brings in a third party who's the developer and they partner on it or whatever. So when I say the developer, that can be nuanced. So that's the typical manner that private lands are developed. The other thing that I would point out in development is at times there's something called leapfrog development, where you'll have, you know, the boundary of the developed or the developed properties. Let's say, and I'll just use as an example, are on 52nd Street, and the next development wants to go a mile down the road, and so there's no services from 52nd Street to, let's say, call it 62nd Street. So there's 10 blocks there that aren't going to be serviced. In the development world, we call that a leapfrog development. And And then, so what has to happen is you have to oversize your services so that you can service the in-between properties that aren't being serviced. That oversizing is, again, generally put on the initial developer, and then there's either through off-site levies or endeavors to assist or other mechanisms, a mechanism for the initial developer to regain his costs or her costs as that development takes place in between. Long answer to your question, but typically what happens is, unless the municipality gets into the development business, developers develop, and the role of the municipality is simply to coordinate that development using the municipal development plan, land use bylaws, and other policies that council might have around development in the community.
If I might, with that goes the requirement for the developer to provide securities to the municipality and off-site levies for other development that continues to, et cetera, correct?
Again, Mr. Mayor, the development agreements range anywhere from, you know, a very simple one on a minor development can be 20 to 30 pages. A major development that's more complicated and has more securities, et cetera, I've seen them up in the 200-300 pages. So it all depends on exactly what's being developed and the proposal for how it gets developed and how it gets paid for.
Thank you. Anything else for administration? Councillor Spicer?
My understanding when the annexation was first asked for, because that has to be taken to the Alberta government, that there was no time period put on it, and that it was put on by the provincial government on us, the time period. Is that correct?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, so that's what our research found, was that the original proposal for the annexation, and that was where, again, I'm going to my opening, excuse me, it's where I assumed that the promise that was made was that the mill rate would be equal to the mill rate of Sturgeon County until such time as there was development on the property or it was further subdivided. So that was what the original proposal that the town of Redwater sent to the municipal government, the MGB, the Municipal Government Board. Subsequent to that filing of that proposal, there was a letter sent back from the Municipal Government Board asking for three things. One was the fee to start the process. But the most significant one in answer to your question, Councillor Spicer, was that they want a clarification on what the time frame was being asked for, because in the proposal it didn't have an end date on it. The letter back from the Municipal Government Board indicated that at that time 15 years was generally the max. They wanted to put a time limit on it, and at that time, so the next letter coming back from the town of Redwater with the fees and some clarifications out of our municipal development plan, and the clarification on the time frame was that the town of Redwater would be okay with the 15-year period. Interestingly enough, even though it was 15 years that was indicated in the letter coming from the Municipal Government Board to the town and from the town going back, for whatever reason, I couldn't find a rationale for it anywhere. So anything would be speculation. It ended up being 16 years, but I don't think that's either here nor there.
Councillor Butcher?
Well, I was there at the time, and we never made any promises. It was anticipated that we were going to get a lot of industrial growth in the area. That being said, is until the developers come, we're stuck in the mud. You know, and there was due diligence on all parts done, although some people may not agree, but the time has come and the tsunami of industry didn't come and the developers didn't come. We have no control over that.
Thank you. Anything else from council? I have one thing I want to put out there. I've got, part of me wants to say no to this motion, part of me wants to say yes to this motion, and part of me wants to say that I think there's a better answer. Right now, I'm just going to say why I would vote for this. And the reason for that is that we have precedents in the municipality that far outlasts the annexed land with respect to servicing. We have a section of our industrial base in town that has never been serviced with water, street lamps, sidewalks, or sewer. And they've been paying town taxes for long before the annexation was ever thought about. And as a result, they live on septic field, pump out, cistern type of water and sewer. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe the only lighting that's provided down there is from Alberta Transportation as far as highway traffic lights that's in the area. So we have a long history that says servicing is difficult. I know for a fact when I moved into Redwater, the house that I occupied had a, and you'll have to help me with that term,
Local improvement.
a local improvement tax attached to it for the pavement out front of my house. I know for a fact that we have 2 or 3 places in town that were subject to what I would call standard process, where they did have a development permit, they did put in the underground facilities, they did do all of those things. And now, just of late, I hear that there are municipalities who are doing that instead of the contractor or the developer at a huge expense. Moving earth and putting in pipes and what have you is not cheap. So that's the part of me that would say I think that this is the way we have to go for the purpose of figuring out how it's going to play out in the future. But we do have that scenario in town where we already have the situation existing. And I just don't know how we make it different for a small percentage of town if we don't include the other percentage of town. And that makes it really difficult to come up with an easy answer, a win-win. You may leave the meeting now, Mr. McLaughlin.
Sorry, I gotta shut off. I know you wanna get rid of me, Dave, but
No,
I'm trying to accommodate, so.
You want to make noise like that, fine, you can leave. Please.
It's just my phone. Sorry, I.
could you please?
Turn it off. Are you asking me I have to leave?
I'm telling you to leave, sir.
Okay, David, if that's what you want. Oh dear.
That would be my argument for this motion. I don't know if council has anything else they want to add to that part of it.
I'm a little
Councilor
frustrated. I'm a little frustrated because I would have liked to have seen this dealt with a lot long before, in a way. I know it had been mentioned and asked before about kind of leading up to this to kind of remind everybody that this was going to happen. And I don't know how many people of these properties knew that 15 years was coming. I don't know if people have owned this property all this time, or I know Richard and Faith have. I don't know about the rest. I don't know if they had, really, did they have a notification that this was coming? This 15-year period was over. They did?
There's a letter sent out by Diane before she left in November
Yeah.
with if I'm not mistaken, an estimate. So,
I would have liked to have seen that a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
though, because that's not, yeah, I remember that letter now.
Yeah.
I do remember that, but, yeah.
Mr. Van Buel?
So, Mr. Mayor, the one thing and I'm not 100% sure on this, but orders in council on annexation are normally registered against title so that if property's sold, people who are coming in understand that there's.
Okay,
there
well,
is.
that's good to know.
But I can't guarantee that 100%. But, certainly the order in council is public. It is not a hidden document, and the real estate agents have some responsibility to ensure that an owner knows what their encumbrances are.
Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Olson.
there was one of these reports, and I can't seem to find it now. It had a list of all the, well, actually, it was the order of council. List all the landowners. I think it was. One of them anyways, it had a list all the landowners, and quite a few of them I still recognize, of course, except for the numbered companies, you know, but yeah. You know what I mean? It is hard, I understand where they're coming from, but I mean, when you look at it, the taxation of Sturgeon County is, as of last year, they're not even up to what we were in 2008. You know, they are, I don't know how to put it, falsely kept low, I guess you can say, because of the windfall they have down the road. We don't have $50 million a year coming in from an industrial base, plus. So, yeah, I mean, last year's tax rate, their mill rate for the housing was only 3.8. And we were, in 2008, 4.4 for a mill rate, so. You know, it is quite the hit. All I can say is I'm sorry.
Anything else? So I mentioned that I was tossed between and betwixt, and so I spoke why I would vote for the motion. I'd like to identify why I'd like to vote against it. And the reason I would vote against it is partially what Councillor Spicer was referring to, but in 3 different sections. The first is during the initial application that Councillor Butcher was referring to for the annexation, there was quite a few public connections running through what annexation was and wasn't. There was so much speculation going on in the area as to who owned what the value of something was. Something that was worth $1,000 yesterday was $2,000 today. And there was an understanding that joining the town would make it a better opportunity for your home to have a larger value because everything was going to grow. There was going to be so much happening. And of course it didn't. But during that process, according to the information I've read about our application and what have you, is the landowners were told that our position was that we were going to support the Sturgeon tax basis until that particular land developed. We understood that, as you explained, Mr. Van Buel, that the development was a developer coming in, opening up a quarter section of land, putting in pipes, valves, all those other kind of things, and people moving in and building houses or businesses. To that end, we forwarded the application based on that information that we'd provided to the landowners. It came back different, and I don't see anything that said we ever reached out at that point in time and told the landowners, guess what? Provincial government, who controls municipalities. Municipalities are not an entity of their own. They're governed by the Municipal Government Act, and the municipality or the province tells us regularly what we can and can't do. The only thing that did happen was that each individual landowner received a copy of that document. So if you look at the actual order in council, there's a distribution list attached to it. And not only were the landowners advised, but some of the corporations that have entities within were also advised. So I don't think we did a good job of service delivery at that particular moment. So that comes across to the fact that the very first year we were supposed to give out sturgeon tax notices for the annexed land. We actually made a mistake and sent out redwater tax notices to those properties, which created some feedback, some blowback as to all of a sudden the tax rate was different, as Deputy Mayor Olson mentioned. That should have been a trigger for us to tell us that we needed to make sure that the newly annexed lands were aware of what was happening, especially when we realized that such a diversification in our mill rates occurred, thanks to the fact that Sturgeon County was receiving large industrial tax bases that we weren't. And then going back to Councillor Spicer's comment, that included the fact that I know when we talked about garbage rates 3 years ago with a different council, I brought up the exact argument that Mr. McLaughlin has. We were taking away the few dollars it was going to cost us for them to go to the dump once a week, as had been happening with Sturgeon County. And during that argument, I brought forward the fact that there wasn't any services, there wasn't any sidewalks, there wasn't any street lights or water and sewer, yet we were taking away the garbage scenario. So based on just that short capsule of time, I don't know if I would support the motion. So that's something else for council to think of. I'll stop talking. Anybody else have anything they want to say? Not seeing anything, I'll come back to my last point, and that is a better way. Mr. Van Buell was very careful in his presentation to us and his report to us. And he indicated in there that there was some other options available to council. In particular, there was one that would allow us to cancel or refund all or part of a tax or defer the collection of a tax. And as I say, I think it would be difficult for the municipality. I'm not going to say it's going to be easy, but it would be difficult for us to look at that option. But I do think it would be important for the residents of that area to know that we were considering what other options might be available. And I just think that based on the fact that our service delivery was a little difficult in this scenario, that we may look at apportioning part of that tax impact for at least this year, because that is an annual process. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor Olson.
I'd like to make the motion to table it to the 2nd of April. meeting with further discussion at the cow on the 26th of March.
That would give us an opportunity to take a look at other options at the cow. That puts you behind the 8 ball as far as timelines go, doesn't it?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of council, depending on what the outcome of those discussions are, we have to have, I'm just trying to think of the timelines here. The timelines for the tax rate bylaw would be no later than the end of April.
For the bylaw.
Yeah, in order to get the, so,
30 days.
so by the end of April, we need third reading of our tax rate bylaw, so that our notices can go out, and this isn't about dollars and cents.
It's the 30th of June delay.
It's legislation.
That
Yep.
30th of June is a hard stop for us.
Yep.
That's in order, because if we don't do that, then there's a whole bunch of other bylaws that we need to change. Right? Because that's our collections, et cetera, for the entire community. So that, outside of a special meeting, sorry, I'm just gonna pull up my phone because I need my calendar.
Yeah.
Outside of a special meeting, that would mean, April 23rd, we would have to make a decision. One complicating factor in that is I am scheduled to be on vacation that week.
But April 2nd works.
Well, we got the 16th
We still have the 16th.
for,
Or we could always call a special council meeting if needed to meet deadlines, et cetera.
And the reason I used the 23rd was, that would be our fourth Tuesday, which would quote be a CAL meeting, but you would
we have a special
you
before
could have a
the cow.
special CAL meeting, so that's what I'm referring to is the special CAL meeting. So yes, if we did it on the 16th, then we would.
So we don't get many of them, but I believe my memory says motion to table is non-debatable. So I'll call that question. All in favor? It's carried unanimously. And I really, this is such a tough thing. It really is. So, all right.
So, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I could, now would be the time, and it's been tabled, but any direction on information, options, et cetera, that you would like administration to bring back? It's April 2nd is,
I would like to see a
sorry,
mitig,
the 26th is next week. We're gonna burn some midnight oil getting some information out for sure.
I just think the options you gave us with regards to delay, deferral, those kind of things, if they were fleshed out as to what we could see numbers associated to those based on a percentage of increase, I mean, it's not going to go away. The provincial government told us exactly what we have to do, but there's an option for us to try and mitigate a little bit some of the past. But anything from council as to what you'd like to see from administration? Is that,
Yeah, what you said was good.
Well, the only thing I'd like to see, because it talked about cancellation refund of all or part. What does that parts look like?
yeah,
So, yeah, Mr. Mayor, members of council, what I didn't come out and say would be, because you can cancel all or part, we could, through that portion of the Municipal Government Act, you could basically extend the tax deferral. You could make the number, you could make,
The county rates.
yeah, you could keep the county rates and refund that portion so that you basically get another year. It's just another way of using
yeah,
the order in council
to our advantage
to,
as opposed to their disadvantage.
to get what you want to do it. And then the other portion of that would be our operating budget is already set, so any dollars that change, we've gotta come up with some options on what we do. And that either means finding the revenue somewhere else or cutting something out of the budget.
Okay. That works for everybody? What do we got here? Item 10.1, where did we put the other one? Oh, we have 11, yeah. Okay, so 10.1, borrowing bylaw, Fin-02-202. Ms. Tingley, I believe that's yours? Are you and Mr. Van Buell?
Looking at each other here.
You and Mr. Van Buell are tag teaming on this, are you?
I lost.
Okay. Go ahead.
Mr. Mayor, members of council, so, as you are all aware, the 2024 capital budget includes the replacement of underground servicing along 52nd Avenue from 54th Street to 52nd Street. This project has been included in the recently amended capital budget, and council projects the funding for this project to be from borrowing in the amount of $440,000. I think important to note here, this is project one of the next 10 years. So administration during the budget process laid out a 10-year program for renewal of our underground infrastructure, and we've prioritized that based on what our condition assessments have said and what our boots on the ground have said. Hey, here's the areas that are causing us trouble. So the $440,000 is the estimated cost of the project based on preliminary engineering estimates. The estimate includes construction engineering costs as well as costs for mobilization and demobilization. However, this estimate has no contingency costs, and it does not include the final engineering. As per the capital budget, we've funded the detailed engineering out of our LGFF funds. And we're not gonna be borrowing monies for those. And as for the costs, any costs that we have around additional costs that might come up out of contingency, the plan from administration that we talked about with council is we don't wanna borrow those costs off the bat, because if you borrow those costs up front, you can't tell the government that we're borrowing 480, oops, we only needed 440, so here's $40,000 back. They go, nope, you've borrowed the 40,000 and you're stuck with that 40,000 for the 10 years. So the plan from administration, or the strategy from administration, is that one of the items in the Municipal Government Act under borrowing is you can go back for up to 15% without advertising, but still passing another bylaw. And that would be what we would probably ask for a contingency anyway, is that 15%. The risk here on doing that is we have to have the cash flow available. What we can tell you is that through the reserves that we do have, we can cash flow that additional 15% on a temporary basis through our reserves until we would be able to replace them through another borrowing bylaw. I will tell you that these dollars, again, are preliminary. I think year two, I'll be more comfortable with what those estimates say, and quite frankly, by year three, and we have 2 years of digging in our ground, and we have 2 years of history of how these projects work, and I'll be more comfortable with those. But the 440,000, we did ask our engineers not to be, don't be cheap. You know, use a conservative estimate. Don't go to the high end of the scale. And so one of the things that they came back to us with was, one of the things that we have going in our community is we have good soils. We don't have poor soils to construct with. They don't tend to slough. They don't tend to seep water. You know, those kinds of things. When you get deeper, when we get some of our deep servicing, i.e. our lift station,
Station.
then you get into some of that. But there's no indication that we have any problems in any of our shallow surface utilities. So, what else can I say about this? Again, in order to meet the timelines required under the Municipal Government Act, what we're trying to do is we're trying to time this so that the bylaw and the tender are done well before the break. We're looking at timing this project into the, into the third quarter. So later on in the third quarter, so that late August, kind of September timeline. And again, that'll help with our cash flow. When we, once the bylaw is approved, it needs a 30-day period for judicial review. So that gives anybody who thinks that we've done the bylaw improperly the chance to review the process, et cetera, without getting a petition, sorry. The other thing it does is it pushes our actual receipt of the cash from the borrowing into September, which is past July, which means that our first repayment is, our first payment is not due until 2025. So, and that's gonna be part of the strategy on a go-forward basis, as far as the timing. The last part to note here is that even though the good news is, on Friday, borrowing, interest rates for borrowing from the provincial government went down on Friday again, not by much, by 8 basis points. We will not be given our interest rate until 2 weeks prior to receiving the funds. So the funds that we're gonna be targeting to get from the provincial government is September 15th, so we won't know what our interest rate is until actually September 1st. The risk here is you have to put an interest rate large enough that a potential increase in interest rates won't make your bylaw invalid. If you put 5%, if you put the upper limit as 5% on your interest rates on your borrowing bylaw, and interest rates at that time are 5.10, you do not have a valid bylaw, they will not lend you the money. So for the purposes of this bylaw, I put 7% as the borrowing rate. I did some quick math. It means about $5,200 a year if it was to go from, I think we used 5.04.
Yeah,
5.04
which on
to
your
7%. If it was to go from 5.04 to 7%, it would be about $5,200 a year extra on your payment plan. So over the course of 10 years, $50,000. But the risk is if you've let that contract and you don't have a valid borrowing bylaw, we have to find $440,000 out of our reserves to pay for that contract, or cancel the contract and pay the penalties of canceling the contract. So that's the risk. That's why the 7%, that's why the 10 years, that's why the timing. But other than that, I'll answer any questions that council might have.
Councillor Spicer?
I'll move that council give first reading to the borrowing bylaw FIN 02-2024, being a bylaw to authorize financing in the amount of $440,000 for the purpose of the water main rehabilitation or replacement project for 52nd Avenue from 54th Street to 52nd Street.
Discussion by council. Go ahead, Deputy Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, through the administration, thank you for all the work you've done on this. I mean, this is great. This is something, I mean, we're looking forward. We're getting underground utilities upgraded from the stuff that's been in the ground since the 40s and 50s. It is also, but when you look at the strategy, you're your taxes aren't increasing. This is all done through a plan. We're paying off some other debentures, and we'll be utilizing that money to add to this reserve to pay these debentures. So it's not like we're gonna be increasing taxes $440,000. I wouldn't even care to guess, you know, but, you know, that'd be quite the hike every year, so, but no, this, I mean, it's good, we're gonna get the work done, and theoretically, right now, it's not gonna cost, and the plan is so flexible, we can start and stop, we can divert, and, you know, it's not set in stone, so it's, I'm happy, thank you.
Anyone else? This is scary for a couple of reasons, and you and I have explored most of them, but we're talking 200 meters of a water line. We're not talking a whole new road system or anything else, no sewer attached to that, no natural gas or anything else. So you're talking 200 meters of a water main that is actually a transmission line. It's not a distribution line. So there's zero connections other than fire hydrants coming off of that line. So you've got a very clear run of just a water line. And the engineers are telling us almost $500,000 by the, you know, when you want to consider, it's a tough world right now as far as dollars and cents go. It is really expensive. And we've talked here at the table about how we wished 40 years ago councils had set up a reserve program at that time. Go ahead.
I'm sure, Mr. Mayor, if you and I were to do it on our property, it wouldn't cost us $500,000. You know what I'm saying?
I don't have 200 meters.
No, I know, but
I know
me neither, but I mean,
it's,
it wouldn't, you know, it's ridiculous when
well,
you say it's being done for a municipality.
And the other thing too is that it's really scary because everything you're doing is hidden. Once that dirt goes back into the trench, you don't have any real idea whether or not the connections are holding, whether or not there's any sloughing and stuff going on like you mentioned and everything else, until there's a failure. And once there's a failure, it's too late. You can't go back and knock on the door and say, sorry, you don't have any water for a week while we dig this back up. But we had a scare 2 years ago now when the vac truck pulled off the connection at the water
Yeah.
and we had all of that water go flying all of a sudden, and because there wasn't a proper valve attached to it, all of our pumps kicked in and everything else, and we put 150 pounds pressure into that water line. And it's a water line that's designed for 50 or 60 pounds pressure. We could have had a major catastrophe here. We could have been trucking water for a year or more, trying to fix all the breaks and everything else. So thankfully, we've been working on making sure that problem has gone away, but we're also now working on making sure that our water infrastructure is secure. So, and that's hugely important. And as we head into the drought and fire season, it's going to be even more important. So, anything else from council? Not seeing anything. The motion on the floor is to give first reading to borrowing bylaw N 02-2024 for a $440,000 loan for the rehabilitation replacement on 52nd Avenue from 54th Street to 52nd Street. Not seeing any more input from council, I'll call that question. All in favor? And that's carried. Now I think we're at 11.1, new business. Go ahead, Mr. Van Buren.
Members of Council, so back in September 25th to be exact, the day before we went to Alberta Munis Conference, we had a presentation from MCSnet, was received by council. Presentation was a next step that led to discussions between MCSnet and the town of Redwater to lease lands at the fire hall for the construction of a tower to bring additional high-speed internet. Not just to our building, but options for our residents in Redwater around high-speed internet. So attached is the proposed lease. This lease, council's seen before, but there is one addition. One of the things that administration negotiated as after receiving direction from council was that we wanted fiber from the tower into this building, and we've negotiated that. What we did was, and the reason it's a walk-on is because it wasn't included in the lease that came back to me. And I was, again, on council direction, not recommendation, direction, we wanted that included in the lease. So that is included in Schedule B. Unfortunately, and I got this Friday and I didn't notice it until this afternoon. Unfortunately, Schedule B is referenced in Schedule D. And Schedule B is the map. And the map does not show the line going across the road into this building. So I have spoken with Kevin Burkhardt from MCSnet. And what we're asking council to do so that we can, MCSnet will not start the actual design of the project until they have a lease. And so the proposed motion is move that subject to amending Schedule B showing the fiber line coming to the administration building, council authorized entering into the agreement with Lamalu Holdings Limited for the lease of the lands at 4927 47th Street, Redwater, Alberta, for the purposes of constructing an internet tower. So I've used the legal name of the company in the actual motion because that's who the lease is with. But Lamalu Holdings operates as MCSnet, so that's just clarification on why I've been using MCSnet and then all of a sudden using this Lamalu Holdings. So as part of the other part of the agreement is we will either get a credit we'll either get paid $25 or we'll get $150 a month credit for internet services from MCSnet. And should cover us for the most part of what we need, which should reduce nominally our bills. But I think the real big advantage to getting the fiber in here is it won't slow down our speeds, and one of the things that we can do is we can provide internet services to the museum, which they've been asking for since basically the day I walked in here. And the only answer I've had for them for just about 2 years is I'm working on it. Well, guess what? If we go this route, we'll be able through a router system be able to get them hooked into certainly a better internet service than they have. Other than that, I think I will point out that the lease is fairly heavily weighted towards MCSnet. But the risk for us is very minimal. The risk for us basically is we lose our, if MCSnet is no longer operating, there's a tower that we have to bring down, and we have fiber that we got to get somebody else to connect to, and we'll have to go back to our previous internet provider and go back. So the actual out of cash pocket risk for us is not big. That's why this lease is weighted, I guess, as heavily as it is towards MCSnet. They're putting in the fiber, they're putting up the tower, it's their cash outlay, so they need to know that they have a longer term. And from a business perspective, they can't afford to get 5 years into this and we change our mind and all of a sudden they're stuck with sunk costs of probably $50,000 to $60,000 that they can't recoup. So, other than that, I'll answer any questions if council might have.
Council? Councillor William?
I move that subject to amending Schedule B showing the fiber line coming to the administration building, council authorize entering into the agreement with Limilu Holdings Limited for the leased lands at 4925 47th Street, Redwater, Alberta, for the purpose of constructing an internet tower.
Thank you. Discussion by council. Councillor Spicer?
You're talking about the internet for the museum, but we could probably offer that to any tenants that are looking at the other building that we have too.
Probably.
Okay. That would be a good plus thing.
Anything else from council? I know you've had this ongoing. We had a nice presentation from them here, so it seems reasonable that this is a good conclusion we can look forward to. So, not seeing anything else from council, I'll call that question. All in favor? And that's carried. Thank you. Reports. Deputy Mayor Olson.
Mine is presented, but what I do want to do is I sent everybody an email regarding the Federation for next week, the 28th. I need to know if you're coming for catering purposes. So I need to know who's coming and who's, so I need to know, sorry. And to play tomorrow.
Yeah. I think you got my response.
Yep.
Councillor Cosby?
I'll leave it as presented, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Spicer, what would you like to report?
I'll just leave my report and I'll put it together and have it for the next meeting. Sure. Thank you.
Councillor Williams?
Nothing else to report.
Thank you. Councillor Melnick?
As presented, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Butcher?
I'll have mine for next month, Your Worship.
Sure. Thank you very much. I'd like to leave mine as presented with the tag on that, as you're all aware, we are again not on the AIHA map, just so we know. Anyway,
We're half there, was it not, you said?
Well,
A third?
well, it's all of Redwater now and an arrow, so it wasn't just RE like it was
Oh, okay.
before with the butt of an arrow.
It might be a bigger font.
Be a bigger font.
It might be a bigger font as well.
Well, it's darker anyway, so. Look for a motion from council to accept reports as presented.
I'll make the motion.
Councilor Butcher, thank you. Call that question, all in favor? All right. We don't have any correspondence, either general or with action. So we're up to item 14, the closed session item. I'll look for a motion to move to closed session, subject to section 17.4F of FOIP and 24.1C of FOIP. Okay, Councillor Melnick, thank you. Call that question, all in favor? And the motion is carried. And it'll just take us a minute